Sarah, keeping us on task.
Yes. So, welcome everyone. I'm so excited that you could join us tonight for Tough Conversations, how to discuss what matters most. I'm Sarah Ayers, and I direct the Business Incubation Program at Innovate Springfield. And we're so lucky tonight because Kelly Gust is going to just really knock it out of the park. I know it. She's an HR expert. She's an Innovate Springfield member and advisor. And it's just been really great for me to kind of follow her and watch her work. You can glean a lot from Kelly. She's just a really sharp lady. So we're all very fortunate to have her tonight. We are recording this session, like I said, so don't worry, we'll post it to our YouTube channel. You can always come back and watch it later. And then please do chat your questions in. We will address questions at the end of the session or even throughout if it's pertinent. And then also don't forget to fill out the feedback survey that we send because we're always trying to get better and provide the most relevant content that we can. So please let us know how we're doing and what we can do to be better. So I'm going to pass the mic to Kelly now. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And welcome, everyone. I know there's quite a few people just joining. I'll maybe just give it a touch longer and stall here for a second while everyone's kind of still getting logged in. Certainly, you will not need your cameras on. You're welcome to stay on mute. And I'll jump right into the housekeeping slide here just so it's official. You're welcome to use the chat at any time. I don't think the group is going to be overwhelmingly huge. Right now, there's 10 of us on here. So do feel free to just raise your hand or just unmute and just jump in the conversation. That's what this is all about anyway, is conversations this evening. There will be a survey to follow after the presentation here tonight. I don't know exactly when Sarah will send it, but do be on the lookout because that feedback is very valuable, both to me as a presenter, but also to Sarah and the folks that Innovate as well. So. All right. Before we get started, just a quick little disclaimer here. I am not an attorney. I do have fortunate to have a partner on my team who is, but this presentation in particular does not constitute legal advice, but we're going to talk instead about just some general guidance on how to handle common business issues and typical conversations that you might need to experience in your business. But the information provided obviously may, or should say may not, cover the professional considerations that would apply to all situations. By way of sneak preview here, one of the type of conversations that we'll discuss tonight is a termination conversation. Obviously, those are very highly loaded. There's a lot of fact checking up front and due diligence that would need to apply there. So take it for what it is, as just conversational advice, not comprehensive HR management of all your personnel issues. So if that's fair enough, we'll go ahead and press on. My name is Kelly Gust. I'm the co-founder and principal consultant with HR Full Circle. My background, I've spent about 20 years in various HR roles. My background is actually in selection and assessment. That's where I started. I've got a psychology background and then, a bachelor's in psychology. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with that and went on to get my master's in industrial and organizational psychology. Through that, then I've spent a number of years in employee selection. I ran global sales assessment for Starwood Hotels. I worked at the headquarters of Hot Topic for about 2 years. My hair was very different then. Hot Topic also owns Torrid, or used to. And that was all kind of bouncing around different, both coasts of the country. And when my husband and I were starting our family here about 11 years ago, we decided to move back to the Midwest. He's from here in Springfield and I'm from Wisconsin. So it was nice to come back and get in touch with our Midwest roots. But personality, selection, assessment, leadership development, coaching, training, organizational development. I can throw HR buzzwords at you all night long, but we could just talk about the fact that I used to work at Hot Topic because that's just a lot more fun. So, but that's a little bit about my background. I'm broadcasting here live tonight from my Lake Petersburg office. So I am here just kind of down the road. HR Full Circle is my business. I went out on my own just about 2 years ago. I had 2 or 3 opportunities throughout my career where I thought I really would like to try consulting and go out on my own. And about 2 years ago, I started at the end of 2019. So hrfullcircle.com, you're welcome to go out and check out my website and see what types of solutions and services that I offer. So the point of our conversation here tonight is we're going to talk about difficult conversations, tough conversations. And just by, just score yourself here. If you have a piece of paper, go ahead and keep track here and give yourself a point. If you've ever procrastinated talking to an employee about their bad behavior, you can give yourself a +1. Give yourself another point. If you've ever tried, as a manager, maybe just being a little nicer, maybe do it for them, maybe show them a little more support, and maybe they'll finally turn that bad behavior around. Give yourself another point. Give yourself a point if you've avoided or worked around an issue with the boss. If you haven't figured this out, this is like golf here with the Masters coming up this weekend. This is like golf where high scores are probably not so good. But give yourself a point if you've ever worked around or avoided an issue with the boss. Give yourself another point if you've ever had to complain about a peer or a coworker or someone that you've worked with. Give yourself another point if you've ever put up with an issue for too long. It could be a work-related issue. It could be a school or team-related issue. It could be a personal situation. And for sure we've all had those in our personal lives as well. What? I'm finally going to talk to my husband about how he handles the recycling. I can't deal with it anymore. Give yourself another point if you've ever sent an email to the whole company or even received an email. I guess you'd give yourself half a point to just address one person's bad behavior. HR departments love to do this. I'm sure I've been guilty at this at some point in my career as well. But just a friendly reminder about the summer dress code because that one person is walking through the hall with flip-flops on, right? So if you've ever done that sort of passive aggressive conversation to the whole company, give yourself another point. And one more point, if you've ever spent more time talking about someone rather than to them, give yourself another point. All right, so those are again kind of golf rules apply here. High scores are not so good, but these are don't feel alone if you're up here scoring in the 5-6 range or higher. Don't feel bad. This is just common human behavior. We have a fight or flight type of response. We tend to be sometimes a little conflict avoidant, especially depending on personality styles. Again, I've spent a lot of time working in the personality measurement and assessment space. There are truly some personality styles that like conflict, and that's how they communicate. But I would say the vast majority of the population is more comfortable avoiding conflict, trying to keep things smooth, trying to smooth the water, smooth the tide. So you're not alone if you've found yourself getting some scores here. We also there's a kind of a hierarchy of difficult conversation and managerial pain that we have to go through. Kind of on the benign level here, passing someone in the hallway, saying thank you, talking about sports, right? That's how a lot of us communicate. Just talking about music. How was your weekend? So small talk here is obviously. Again, for some people, I won't lie, that's extremely painful. But for most of us, that sort of casual conversation is really not a tough conversation. It's not very difficult. Moving up the chain here, a one-to-one, manager sitting down with an employee, talking about how things are going, how's their performance. That in general is not going to be a very tough conversation. Sweating it a little higher on the scale here, having to give someone feedback. Now here's where things start to maybe get a little like, ooh, how am I going to deal with that? I better think about it. Objective feedback based on data or facts. You were supposed to do X, you did Y, can we talk about it? So again, we're starting to feel a little flushed in the cheeks here, perhaps. Moving up the scale, having to give someone feedback about something that's a little more ambiguous. Things like soft skills, competencies, customer service behavior. Did you smile enough? How's your attire? Those sorts of things now they're a little more ambiguous. And so some people find those conversations to be a little more difficult. Performance reviews. People do not like giving performance reviews. So on the difficult conversation pain scale, in my experience, it's kind of moderate pain we're experiencing here. We're going, ugh, I don't like having to have this conversation. And even worse, if it's a bad performance review, now we're really going to sweat it. Moving up the scale here, now this person's crying. They're having a tough time here. a termination conversation, a difficult peer conversation, having to give the boss difficult feedback. This is on the pretty severe pain here in terms of the scale of difficult conversations. Termination conversations are extremely difficult to have, but they are part of the business world. So that is one that we do need to learn to deal with. And then finally, you're thinking, what could be worse? What would be worse than a termination conversation? Anybody have a thought what might be worse on the scale here? Feel free to use the chat, or again, there's not a huge group here. You're welcome to just unmute. Anybody have a thought? I'll watch my chat here. I don't see anything coming in the chat. Anybody have a guess? Yeah, sexual discrimination. That's it says Nathan. It's a pretty close guess. Yeah, definitely. Anything that falls on the scale of awkward, or I use the word awkward, but uncomfortable, unpleasant, personal issues, hygiene issues, even dress code, especially if it's a dress code conversation that is like, a male manager to a female employee, are very high on the list of managerial most fear factor, highest fear factor conversations. Anything there that anyone would disagree with or add to this list? You're welcome to use the chat to chime in. No pressure though. I know it's a happy hour. People are relaxed and maybe you've got your cocktail here, but feel free to chime in if there's anything I missed on this list. Keep an eye on the chat. No pressure if not. Okay, so here's how we're going to spend our time here, picking from this list, kind of in reverse order, from the lowest pain point. I'll start there. We're going to go through just how to give someone feedback, a general feedback conversation. We'll talk about performance reviews and my tips and tricks for delivering a performance review that will resonate. Even as a bonus, we'll get into a bad performance review. We'll talk about a termination conversation and what that might need to sound like. We'll go through a boss and peer conversation. I use them kind of interchangeably here because there's some similar social risk happening in those conversations. We'll talk through the super awkward and super uncomfortable conversation. And then finally, we'll close out with how can you avoid this altogether? Because back on my scale here, we have, one-to-ones, pretty benign type of conversation. So how do you do that and avoid the difficult conversation, hopefully altogether? So that's our agenda here tonight. If there's anything else you'd like to see or questions that you have along the way, by all means, raise your hand, unmute, or just fire off a chat. And I'm keeping an eye on that as we go through as well. Okay, so when we talk about difficult conversations, first of all, I thought this was kind of interesting, and I'm not usually a fan of like, let's define the word, it's a noun. But I kind of got thinking, when we talk about a conversation, the word conversation itself is very meaningful. And a conversation is defined here as a talk, especially an informal one, between two or more people in which news and ideas are exchanged. So there's a two-way piece here. And I think to some extent, that's what makes a two-way conversation kind of unpredictable and uncomfortable and maybe fearful to some extent, is that there's this whole other person on the other side of the equation, right? What are they going to say? How are they going to respond? I don't know. How will I respond to what they say to me? And there's this whole fear factor piece. And what we want to try to do is keep it informal. We're just adults talking, right? We're two or more people and we're exchanging news and ideas. And Sarah says, well, I put my foot in my mouth. And at some point tonight, I assure you, I certainly will. We still have an hour and 16 minutes to go. So wait for it. I think the key words here, an informal conversation, two or more people, and news and ideas are being exchanged. It is a two-way type of dynamic. If it was a dictatorial edict, then we wouldn't even be having this meeting. Just issue your edict, decide and announce, and everyone will magically fall into line. But of course, as managers and leaders and educators, that's not how it works. Building conversational capacity in your organization undoubtedly makes your team smarter, stronger, and more resilient. When you have a history of sweeping things under the rug and avoiding it, at some point, something really bad is going to happen and everyone's going to go, oh, don't tell the boss. We don't talk about that stuff here. We don't talk about soft skills. We don't talk about sexual discrimination. We don't talk about those things here. And that slows your team down. information doesn't get passed to the people who need it. People don't get the feedback that they need, the sort of emperor's new clothes dynamic. So you need to build your skill and your comfort level in building conversational capacity, becoming comfortable talking about the stuff of work where you're getting paid to do a job. It's okay to talk about it. So just, make a note there of that skill set is something that you need to develop, especially as you move up in your organization. So conversational capacity here, what does that mean? It's the ability for teams and individuals to, remain focused on your purpose, remain learning focused, even when things are awkward or uncomfortable or difficult. How can we keep our eye on the prize? Conversational capacity means working in the sweet spot of a conversation. We're having candor, we're being courageous in saying the tough thing that needs to be said, but we're also maintaining some curiosity and some humility. Remember, it's a two-way conversation, and you don't know what that other side of the equation, what that person across the table or across the camera from you, how they're going to respond. They may see things completely differently and point out something that you had never thought of. So maintain that curiosity and humility. And it's in that sweet spot where we can be open-minded, we can be even-handed, evidence-based, learning-focused. I mean, this sounds like utopia, doesn't it? Don't you just want to live in this great open dialogue type of environment? Even when we're facing a tough issue, we know that we've built up the trust and the comfort level that no one's going to die. It's going to be fine. We'll get through it together. We're a team. We can look at the issue, resolve it, and move on, and come back tomorrow and do it all over again. So conversational capacity is a skill here that we want to continue to develop. All right, so let's dig into our 6 types of conversations that we're going to cover here this evening. Before we get started into one of those, just a couple of general types of conversations. One, if you've ever read Fierce Conversations, and that type of, there's 3 or 4 courses there that are very similar to that. But a safe place, a quiet place, building psychological safety. You're not going to march up to someone in the middle of all of their peers and coworkers and put them on the spot and call them to task and give them that awkward feedback in front of someone, right? If you've got something in your teeth, you don't want to be told in the middle of your presentation. You want somebody to kind of pull you aside, say, hey, Kelly, you got something going on here, right? So safe, quiet place. Keeping with the spirit of the definition of conversation, you can be informal. This doesn't need to be, come sit across from my big, powerful mahogany desk and you sit there in your little tiny subordinate chair. Go out to lunch, grab a coffee, have a cocktail, go golfing. Business gets done on the golf course because it's laid back. I'm on a golf kick lately. I don't know if it's the Masters or what, but I'm just looking out my window and seeing green grass. But work gets done in those places because you're laid back. It's informal. It's not so stuffy. And if you're stuck in the Zoom world here for a while longer, like many of us are, maybe turn the camera off, maybe just have a phone conversation, maybe say, hey, let's have a happy hour and talk about some different sorts of things. So try to take the formality down a little bit. And that helps to level the power dynamic. If you've all been in the boss's office, that's an intimidating place sometimes where it feels a little hard to be in that sweet spot of candor and learning mode. I will also say, and I'll circle back on this at the end here, but if you're a manager, you need to be doing one-on-one conversations on a regular basis. It could be 15 minutes once a day. It could be an hour once a week. It can be an hour once a month. Find what time commitment and what cadence works for you and your staff, and get in the habit of doing one-on-ones. Why? You're going to hear this again in about 45 minutes from me, but one-on-ones create a time, a place, and a pattern of talking about the stuff that happens at work. They are clutch to building your conversational capacity. So get in the habit of doing that. And we'll come back to that here at the end, but when you're doing one-on-ones, half the fear factor is gone. You've got a time, a place, a cadence. You've built up trust. You've got trust in your bank account to cover the check that you're about to cash on this person for the difficult conversation. So get in the habit of doing that and stick to it. And I'll circle back on that at the end. powerful conversation starters. And I'm going to give you a lot of these here in the next few minutes, but it's just saying something. Hey, can I give you some feedback? I'd like to talk to you about the customer that came in yesterday that was upset. Are you open to a conversation about that? Can we talk about that? Would you be open to discussing dress code? Can I share my observations about something that I saw? Can I tell you how I see it differently? Any type of opener like this is very powerful because you're getting permission from the person. And the psychological trigger that happens when someone says yes, you're knocking on the door saying, can I talk about this with you? And the person is saying, yes, come on in. I am open to discussing that with you. So the very simple act of just asking, are you open to talk about this? Can I give you some feedback? Are you open to a conversation about X, Y, or Z? Is hugely psychologically powerful. And even better, if you can do this over coffee or lunch or, at the golf course, wherever is your hangout, it's hugely impactful. And if they say no, someone asked a question here, what if they say no? Um, as the boss, you have some dynamic here to say, okay, well, this is important to me. I'd like to set up some time. You could say, when would be a better time? Maybe right now is not the best time, right? So when can we set that up? And again, if there's still some resistance there, you might have to just pull up the boss pants and say, I'm just going to schedule time for us to talk about this next week, Tuesday. I'd like you to come prepared. So just some pointers there. Okay. And then once you get that conversation going, again, this is a two-way piece here. This isn't just talk at them and decide and announce. Keep that conversation going. The key here is open-ended questions. What ideas do you have? What did you do? Why did you do that? Who can help? What's your goal? There's endless number of open-ended questions here, but you have to kind of keep that part of your mind open, curiosity, humble inquiry to see it from their perspective. Keep your list of open-ended questions. An open-ended question, I'm sure many of you have heard before, anything that starts with who, what, where, when, why, how. I'm kind of heavy on the what's and the who's here, but any type of open-ended question that starts with one of those words is going to keep that conversation going, so it doesn't sound like a decide and announce type of edict. Okay, general pointers. Let's get into some of our specific conversations. First of all, the general feedback conversation. I put the pain tolerance here, pretty mild. If we're doing this right, hopefully this is no big deal conversation. So how do we do it? Let's kind of ease our way into it. Feedback conversation. Why is this needed? Maybe somebody goofed something up in a manner that if they just knew they had goofed it up, they would fix it and all would be well. Maybe someone is new to the job or they're performing a task for the first time. They may need some feedback. And maybe somebody displayed a little bit of behavior that's just a little off track, a little off course, maybe missed the mark just a little bit. Again, some of those conversation starters for this relatively benign type of conversation is, can I give you some feedback? I'd like to talk about what happened. Are you open to discussing it? Can I share my observations? And you're going to end that with, for your ongoing improvement, maybe consider these ideas. Sarah chatted in here. She relies on, I challenge you to consider this idea. So again, you're sharing your feedback and keeping your open-ended questions in mind. Why did you do that? What happened after you did that? What could you do differently? Any of those types of open-ended questions will really help you. So pretty benign kind of conversation here, right? So it's a low level, low grade, relatively benign sort of error or off track behavior. And you're going to jump in here and say, hey, I saw what you did there. I saw that customer yesterday. Some examples I've received in my experience here, or conversations I've had to weigh in on, you've got a new hire, they're waiting on their first table. Overall, they did a great job, but they could have upsold a couple things. Hey, can I give you some feedback? Can I give you some pointers? Can I give you some tips? Maybe they're not smiling enough. Maybe I was told once I gave a presentation and was told, that was a great presentation. Can I give you some feedback that would help you improve? And I said, sure. I said, in this particular example, you should have worn a suit. And I thought, okay, well, I can do that, right? So big deal. people get talked nail biting, interrupting, saying huh too much or saying too much. We're all doing those things. It's relatively benign when you get that feedback. So general feedback conversation, there's some pointers there. So what's the big deal about this conversation? Honestly, hopefully nothing. I think feedback conversations are relatively painless if, big if, you need to do them right away. I would say within 24 hours. Don't let more than a day go by. If you see something and you're going, that's a little off track, I could help them with that. Don't let more than a day go by. If you're in the habit of doing regular one-on-ones, I would give you until your next one-on-one if it's, close to that 24-hour window. If you're meeting once a week, every other week, maybe hold on to it. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't hang on to it longer than that. Why? Because if you procrastinate, that's when things start to get awkward, right? If I had lettuce in my teeth last week, why didn't you just tell me then? Why did you wait a week? That's really weird. I'm sure you've also been in a position where maybe you've mispronounced someone's name. Believe it or not, my last name, Gust, people will come to me and call me Guest and Gust and Gest or Gust. I mean, who knows? But if someone does that, you just correct them right away and it's no big deal. But if you wait and a month later, you're like, oh, actually, this is how you say my name. Gosh, now that's really awkward. You've made it awkward. So jump on those benign, relatively easy feedback opportunities right away, and it ends up to be not a big deal. So feed forward is another kind of trending way to give feedback or give advice or let someone know what's on your mind. So feed forward is another way you can approach that as well. Okay. So that's the first conversation. Let's move on here to the performance review. Again, if you have questions along the way, unmute, use the chat. I've got my chat open and I'm keeping an eye on that as well. So performance review. Okay, pain tolerance is having to go up here a little bit, from mild to maybe more of kind of moderate. Performance reviews are right up there with dental work and other things that people just don't like to have to go through. Even organizations, I've been a part of a lot of performance review redesigns, got 3 going on right now, where, how are we going to structure our reviews? We want them to matter, regardless of how they're restructured. As hip and cool as we can make those reviews be, people still don't like doing them. So how can we survive that conversation? In a good performance review conversation, now if you think about, close your eyes and think about your employee population, most of your employees, I'm going to say, I'll throw out 80%, 75% are solid performers or better. You might have some good performers, great performers, outstanding performers. So kind of keeping that in mind here, that's who we're talking about for this first pass at performance review. Why is a performance review conversation needed? Well, it's that time of year and HR said so. They sent out the invites. I got to do it. I have to have it turned in, or my merit increases won't go out, right? So that's part of it. But even more importantly, a good review conversation can actually help you reflect and review and improve performance. Helps you align, it helps you connect, it helps you develop your people. So this is an important conversation in the sort of managerial realm. Why do people not like it? The scoring, I mean, God, that makes it weird. We don't like it. It feels overly formal. It feels like a parent-child, one person's like issuing a decision on another person. People don't like that. Some managers feel like they have to be a tough grader. I don't give anyone a 5 on a 5-point scale. Okay, good for you. And that makes it weird. You're making it weird when you do that. You're afraid the employee might get defensive. And again, your good to great performers could leave feeling deflated. And that is a miss. And when that happens, so how do we avoid that? Conversation starters for this, I rip off this script here and make it your own. But hey, you know what? Sally, I know performance reviews can be a little awkward, but they're very important. And I don't want that sort of awkwardness to cause us to rush. I think it's important that we look back on last year and that we make some plans together to look ahead, look forward, set some new goals, and continuously improve. I take my own advice here and I might slip in. Are you okay having a conversation like that? Does that sound good? Hopefully Sally says yes. Then I start with, Sally, before we get started, I just want to say thank you for everything that you do around here. I mean, I probably don't say it enough, but thank you. In fact, specifically, Sally, there are some things that really stand out to me. Remember that time you came in on a Saturday to respond to that customer data outage? That was awesome. I really appreciated that. And that time that you improved our approach to quality assurance testing, you really helped us reduce our number of defects here this year. And I just want to say thank you for that. Sally, how do you think the year went? And now Sally's got a chance to do some talking, and you can agree with her and you kind of go on, you're off and running, right? The conversation has started. You're in a two-way dialogue here. Why is this important? Now, my source here for this information, if you've ever heard of a guy called Mark Murphy from Leadership IQ, he puts out some fantastic content around taking the pain out of performance reviews. And this is kind of a little snippet of some of a snippet of his similar kind of content. So Mark Murphy from Leadership IQ. What I like about this here is that, one, you've taken the awkwardness out of it because you've called out the elephant in the room, and you've taken down their defenses. You start off and you say thank you in a performance review. Wow, awesome! Like, my guard is coming down, right? If I'm receiving this conversation, I'm thinking, gosh, okay, I can relax. This is going to go well. So your high performer here is feeling a little motivated. They're feeling appreciated. Their guard comes down. How many of you have had to prepare for a performance review by thinking, like, I better write a novel about my own performance so that I have some ammo when my boss comes at me. So you're taking that guard down, right? So I love that about this approach. What's the big deal with this conversation? Again, I'm going to say nothing is really a big deal. I think if you follow this process, this is going to go great. Performance reviews are relatively painless if you can keep them positive, keep them focused on the future. This isn't a chance to beat up somebody for everything that they did wrong over the last 12 months. And you don't want, again, your average performers, your rocks, your solids, as well as your good and your great and your outstandings, to leave that conversation and feel deflated. You don't want them to feel demotivated, beaten up. You don't want them leaving there and going, that's it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to start looking for a new job. And you really don't want them to walk out of that conversation and say, hey, Kelly gives really tough performance reviews. You better have your ducks in a row when you go to have that conversation, because it was rough. It was grueling. You don't want that reaction either. So, keep it positive, keep it forward facing, say thank you, and let your average and good and great employees just like have an okay conversation. It doesn't need to be tough. So that's my take on performance reviews. Questions about that? Keep them coming in the chat. Now, if it's a bad review conversation, what do we do differently? Why do we need this? Obviously, some employees just aren't, I don't want to say low performers, because that's admittedly on the slide here, I don't love the wording there. Some employees are just not aligned with how they're trying to do the job with how you want the job done. So, to cheat that, we call it low performance. They're good people. They're just trying the wrong strategies in your particular job for how you need it done. So some employees are kind of missing the mark there consistently. And, a difficult performance review can be a wake up sort of last chance call. You could go back 20 years ago and think, like, we needed documentation to justify our termination decision. And yes, you do need all that, but that's really no longer sort of the common approach of why do a performance review. Bad reviews are tough. You don't want to say the wrong thing. You don't want to get in trouble. You don't want to escalate a problem, and you yourself as the manager now is ending up in on the bad sides of HR. So you don't want to say the wrong thing. This conversation here also is really where we start to expose, if you have an underdeveloped manager muscle, it's going to show up here. I think also this conversation can be tough because you haven't done all your feedback, you haven't done your one-on-ones, and now you really are coming into that conversation with like a notebook or a list of everything that this person's done wrong, and they're going to get caught by surprise. And that is a bad feeling, and that's not a good way to do a performance review, even a bad one. So those things will make this harder than it needs to be. bad review conversation here. How do you get this going? Here, we don't have to be quite as nice. We can just cut to the chase. Jane, we need to talk about your performance. As you know from our one-on-ones and the miscellaneous various feedback conversations we've had here, the news is not so good. As we've been talking about here for the last couple months, your performance is it's too low, it's off track, you're not hitting the mark, make this your own. I believe, Jane, you can turn this around if you're ready to make the choice to do so. Let's jump in and talk about some of the specifics. So I would just kind of jump right into this conversation. Here you are kind of level setting, you're wanting to paint a very clear picture that something needs to change. Some keywords here: you can make the choice to turn it around if you choose to do so. So you don't need to own this employee's performance, but you're allowing them some space to, again, take accountability and open that door. So here I'm a little more direct in a bad performance review or a low performer kind of conversation. Questions about that? Pause here. I've been
I don't really have a question, Kelly, but mostly just a comment about how the point that these hard conversations expose where we are weak as leaders, and that those are places where we could develop. And that was something that I took from that very first scale slide that you shared with the conversations, because it's like, if we can check in on our conversations and know that those low level conversations really shouldn't be anxious conversations, but if they are, then something's off, right? And so I don't know, it's just kind of helping me to see just the picture's a little clearer, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good. Yeah. And, it's, as a manager, I think as an individual contributor, you're out there doing your job. Nobody reports to you. You're not anybody's boss. You show up, you live in this glorious world, like show up, do a good job, and that's it. And now as a manager, you have to use different skills and flex different muscles and value different outcomes based on other people doing the job. And you kind of take your career juju now, not necessarily from you doing it right, but them doing it right, and sort of that proud moment of like, oh, look at Jane, she turned it around, and I almost fired her, and now look at her, she's doing great. So you learn to kind of flex some different muscle there and take your reward in a different way, but it does require working out some different muscles. If you've just been a runner and you decide to enter a triathlon, first of all, good for you. You're way more fit than I'll ever be. But, the swimming muscle is not the same as the running muscle and not the same as the biking muscle. And you have to work out all those different muscles for all those different purposes. So it is a practice. It's something you can develop. So, okay, good. So, and even this, a bad review conversation, if you're doing this right, again, like as we've been talking about, your performance is low. This is not going to be a surprise to this person if you've done all the lead up to it. So this is just check the box. We got to have this conversation. It's that time of the year. HR sent us the review schedule. They're due next week. Let's sit down. Now, by way of process here, again, I'm stealing this from Mike Murphy from Leadership IQ. Always do your good review conversations first. They're easier, they're more relaxed. Your muscle has time to, get back in shape here as you're doing this. And your good performers will walk out of that conversation and they'll say, gosh, I just had my review and it was actually kind of nice. Like she said, thank you. And had some specifics, and we got a plan for what we're going to do looking ahead. If they walk out and go, oh God, I just had my performance review and it was terrible, she's still on my case. Now all your good performers are going, ooh, I better get my ducks in a row because I don't want to have a bad performance review. And they start, putting on their armor. So always do your good review conversations first. And then you can tackle your bad ones later. So Good stuff. And someone asked, am I available to hire as a consultant to help companies? Yes, that is what I do, and my contact information is at the end. So performance reviews are one of my favorite things to talk about, because so many people hate doing them and don't do them well. And I love to help people kind of get that back on track. All right, so let's move along here. The dreaded termination conversation. Um, these are, there's no way to, I don't want to say there's no way to make this less difficult, because it is a difficult conversation. It's up there with the worst kind of human conversation that we can have in the workplace, right? Why is this needed? There's been no pattern of job improvement. You've had the difficult one-on-ones, you've given the tough feedback, you've had the tough performance review, and just poor Jane. There's no one named Jane on this call, is there? I should always look and make sure I don't see any Janes. I just pull these names out of a hat. So poor Jane, she has not made the choice to improve her performance. So no pattern improvement is why you're having to have this conversation. Also, egregious behavior. Somebody stole something, they were fighting, they were, drunk on the job. Who knows what kind of nasty, they're the boss and they're in a relationship with the employee. They've been photocopying bad parts of their bodies and sending them through the company chat, right? Bye. Those things happen. Also budget cuts and reorganizations. Those things lead to, we have to separate employment, we have to downsize. And so those things make it tough. Why is this a difficult conversation? I mean, I think the last bullet sums it up. It's just awful for everyone involved. It's never fun. It's never good. If it's a bad performer, sometimes it's a relief, and it's like you can see the light again, but it's still difficult. There are also high stakes. There are legal ramifications here if you do approach this conversation from the wrong way. You don't want to escalate a bad situation and end up spending more time and effort in a legal settlement of some sort, or court case. So these are very high up on the list of difficult, awful conversations to have. But you can do them as well as they can be done, and just try to get through it in the best way possible. So logistics for this conversation: a quiet, private place. This might be a little more formal. You're maybe in a conference room, something like that. Somewhere quiet, out of the way. You don't want to embarrass this person. You want to respect them, respect their humanity, ultimately, and allow them to save face. You're not exiling them from the island. You're just letting them know, hey, this is not, your employment here is not going to continue after today. This is a conversation where you may want to include HR, if you have HR available, another manager, a supervisor, a peer, etc., to sit in on this conversation. You want to also be prepared for this conversation. This isn't one that you're going to want to wing it, and it's going to be much less of a two-way dialogue than a typical conversation. You want to balance being to the point. You want to balance respect, empathy, and professionalism. What you don't want to do is be defensive. You don't want to say things like, well, I didn't make the decision, but the company has decided, right? You don't want to pass the buck. You don't want to say, I know how you feel. It wasn't my decision. I know this is difficult. It's hard for me too. Like, no, it's not as hard. You're not the one getting fired. This is not the opportunity either to read back every mistake that they've made, every one-on-one, every performance review, et cetera. You don't need to go through all that. The decision's been made. We're going to have the termination conversation. So if someone's being let go for poor performance, I'd probably jump right in. Hey, Eric, as you know, we've been talking a lot about your performance lately. It's been real difficult for everybody involved. And at this point, we've made the decision that this just is not working for anyone, and we're going to end your employment here effective today. We are prepared to offer you whatever you have to offer. Some sort of severance always makes this go easier. And in the long term, really probably doesn't cost you that much. If someone hasn't been performing, you've been paying them already anyway to not really do the job. So a couple more weeks or months of that is not going to break your bank, but a lawsuit or a court case might. So some severance if you can afford that as part of your process. always makes that land easier. Eric, I know this is upset. This is difficult. I know this is a lot to process. Let me walk you through some next steps here, and we'll follow that up with an email and mail you all this information so that you can review it at your own time. And here's who you can contact to help answer questions and support you through this transition. So that's probably how I would get that out on the table. We could talk all day about, probably not all day, but at least an hour, just on terminations and the questions that people will ask and how to answer them, things like that. And, really at this point, short and sweet, but also respectful. They're not, again, this is not a bad person, a bad human with no self-worth sitting across a table from you in this conversation. They're just the wrong person for this job in your organization today. So you don't need to make them feel like crap. You don't need to beat them up. You don't need to call them to task. You just say, look, we've been talking a lot about this. It's not working out. And here's what we're going to do to help you kind of land on your feet. One of the, I don't know, in a twisted way, kind of rewarding moments in my career was we had a mid-level IT executive who was just not the right fit for this particular role, going at every decision from kind of the wrong angle, clashing with his staff, and just wasn't seeing the vision in a way that was allowing him to kind of lead his team to achieve it. And so many hours spent with this manager, just frustrated about how things were going. And ultimately, we made the decision to terminate. We basically followed this exact process: quiet conference room, short and sweet, to the point, gave him the information, treated him with respect, like a human, helped him get through this transition. And at one point, about a month post termination, he sent me a text and said, Kelly, I just want to thank you for helping me get out of that situation in such a professional manner. You made it as easy as it could go, and I found another job, and I'm much happier here, and I just want to say thank you. And I was like, awesome. So yes, it's a difficult conversation, but there is a way through it that can be the best way through it. So there's my take on termination conversations. They're awful, they're horrible, no one loves them, but just try to do them the best way possible and get it done. Termination for downsizing, I feel like in a lot of ways is obviously it's even worse. What does that conversation sound like? Honestly, very similar. However, you don't need to beat around the bush. You don't need to explain 1,000 reasons why. Business hasn't been good. The company's restructuring. It's been a difficult year. We have had to make the difficult decision, unfortunately, to make some changes, and your position is one that's affected. It's being eliminated, effective immediately. We're prepared to offer you some severance. We have 2 weeks, 3 months, whatever you have. I know this is difficult. It's a lot to process. Let me walk you through it. And again, here's who to contact for questions and support. Now, at this point, again, shock comes into this conversation as well. A lot more questions. Why me? Why not Johnny? Is this reversible? Can I come back? Can I reapply? So you want to have your ducks in a row for this type of a conversation, but in the spirit of kind of getting this going, and how would you approach it? This is where I would start. So this is a key slide here that's in the realm of, I'm not giving you the whole picture, but this is how you would get that conversation started. Again, you want someone else there. You want to have your ducks in a row. You want to have thought through all the next steps and anticipate the type of questions that they might ask. We could also get into, with downsizing, like survivor guilt and what to say to the people who didn't get laid off. Whole other, many other conversations we could layer in here. But at a high level, termination, that's how I would approach it for these 2 reasons. Again, I'll pause here. I know this is probably one of the more loaded topics. Any questions here or comments?
Please feel free to unmute or raise your hand or chat, whatever's most comfortable for you.
Definitely.
What if the employee has a nervous breakdown or has some sort of emotional turmoil and, just starts crying? What do you do in that kind of situation?
Yeah, my standard response there, and I think there's 2 responses: crying and then fist pounding anger, like, what the hell, why me? Those are similar emotions, believe it or not, coming from a similar place. So that could show up in one of two ways. But to respond to yours, the question, the crying piece, I know this is very upsetting. I know it's a lot to process. I'm sure it's overwhelming. Take as long as you need. I'll go get the tissues, get yourself together. And, we'll give you some time there to kind of get yourself together before, we go through next steps. Do you need a couple minutes to yourself? I might say something like that. I'll be right outside, get yourself together. I'll be outside. Just stick your head out when you feel like you've composed yourself. So it doesn't change the outcome, and it's not an opportunity to revisit the decision, obviously. So it is, it is up there in like the worst uncomfortable things in HR and management that you have to do. But do you allow the person some personal respect and humanity to get themselves together and get back to a place where they can talk about it? They may not get to that place. And in that case, I would say, you know what? I'm going to send you all of this information. Why don't you go home? I'll help you. You can go out the back. You don't need to walk through everybody and parade your crying self through the hall. Let me walk you out the back. Take some time, get yourself together. Give me a call when you're ready to talk about it. We'll have all this information mailed to you anyway. So I might use that approach too if it's severe. Does that help?
Yes.
What
I
if
mean, I'm not a manager. I'm just asking, but that was really helpful.
Yeah, it is obviously uncomfortable, and I've been on both sides of it. I've been laid off. I've been the one going, what, and I've been the one having to do those conversations, and it's never fun. It's equally horrible, and despite what it says, like, don't say it's. I know how you feel. It's horrible on both sides. A question came in: what if the employee is in a union? I got to give you a big fat it depends there, because your union contract will dictate what you can do, can't do, what policies and steps you might need to follow. So you would need to layer in on the management side your employee relations, labor relations specialist to kind of help you navigate that decision. So just more I's to dot and T's to cross there as to how that conversation will go down depending on your union contract. Okay, and I hate to use it depends, but I don't know what your union contract says. So you got to make sure all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed for that conversation.
I'll ask maybe an easier one then.
Yeah.
So is it better to elongate the decision to fire or terminate, or to be expeditious in doing so when you have an employee that's eventually where your conclusion is going to go?
Yeah, good question. There you could, again, we could probably debate about this all day here. And I feel like I've heard the expression hire slow, fire fast. I'm not saying I agree with it, but let's just start with that perspective. So some people will buy into that school of thought and say, you know what, take your time on the front end, really make sure you're having good interview conversations. This could be another one we could add here as a bonus, but take the time on the front end, really make sure you get to know the person, make sure everybody's on board with what the job is and that you're bringing in the right person. But if things go off track, don't spend a year performance managing. Now, again, your union contract will dictate what you might need to do. But if it's not working out, it's not working out, and you're just prolonging the pain by dragging it out. So you can cut to the chase, especially in an at-will employment situation. I think if you decide to go that route, I am in the camp of more severance will help that go easier. You brought this person in, you offered them a job. If you brought in the wrong person, that's on you also as a manager. I was in a job once for 2 months. They were like changing the terms of the job, and they're like, maybe you're not the right person to do all this traveling. And I'm like, I would have never signed up to do all this traveling. So, if you hired the wrong person, that's on you. And, don't just bring in somebody, tell them they're awesome 1 month, and then the next month you're kicking them to the curb. So if you do find yourself in that boat, hey, look, this is not going like we thought. I'm sure it's as awful for you as it's uncomfortable for us. And what we're going to do for you is offer you 4 months of severance to help you transition and get back on your feet. So if you do decide to take that approach of hire slow, fire fast, I think more severance there is a nice buffer to show some respect and human consideration for this person. If as a manager, you've had to ever performance manage someone out of an organization who isn't working out, it takes a ton of time. It takes a ton of effort. You're not getting any work done. They're not getting any work done. Add all that up, put it in a severance package, and go from there. So I do think that a severance package can really help that go more smoothly. Is it, and again, then you may have, you need to consult with your own employee handbook, HR policy manual, union contract, if that applies. And you may have certain steps that you need to go through where you can't cut to the chase. You have to follow the process. And if so, then I would advocate for that as well. So, yeah, the cost of time lost is a big one. You can spend a ton of time performance managing, and they're sitting at their desk building their case. You're sitting at your desk building your case. No one's getting any work done anyway. Hey, look, we're going to pay you. Netflix, I think at one point was paying like 6 months of severance. If somebody wasn't working out, they're like, bye, here's 6 months, take a vacation, see you later, but you're not working here anymore. So there are different schools of thought on that. Next question, how do you handle feedback complaints that come from other employees about an employee? It's awkward to say I have a complaint from a staff that you've done XYZ, especially when it's obvious who the whistleblower is. If it's relatively benign stuff, so-and-so is not doing their job, they didn't do this, they didn't do that, I would probably start with, well, what did you say to them about it? I mean, I to some extent, I think trying to encourage employees to develop their conversational capacity with each other as well, I think is a skill that is worth developing. So, that sort of tattling kind of behavior. I have 2 boys, they're 8 and 10, they telling each other all the time. And I'm either like, okay, well, if it's that important, you need to handle it. What did you say to your brother when he did that to you? And the same thing kind of applies with employees. Like, well, what did you say to them when they did that in front of you? And try to start there and encourage that kind of behavior. Now, if they want your help, my next question would be, what would you like me to do about this? Do you want me to talk to them and say that you have a conversation? Do you want me to join you in the conversation? The 3 of us can sit down. Do you want to do nothing? What do you want to do? It does depend on the situation as well. If it's a sexual harassment type situation, so now you're the manager, now you know about it, somebody's got to say something, you're involved in the situation at that point. But if it's relatively benign, just sort of personality, work related stuff, I like to try to encourage them to work it out. You should talk to them about that. That does sound serious. It sounds like you're upset. What have you done? Have you had that conversation? Here's how to have a conversation. I would use all of that before I would try to take it off their plate. And then my next step up there would be, how would you like me to be involved? Do you want me to talk to them about it? Do you want me to tell them that it came from you? They're already going to know. So, what role would you like me to play as your supervisor in this conversation? So, okay. Versus giving opportunities to cure them. Sorry, let me read the chat. It's such a grind. Yeah, yeah. We're all children in the workplace. So yeah, the one tattling on the other, etc. The more you give that tattling kind of behavior a home in your office, the more that tattling behavior will come and set up camp. Some employees, unfortunately, are just looking for attention. They want an ear to cry on. They want someone to feel sorry for them, whatever. If you give that behavior a home, it will come in and set up camp in your living room. So, look, Gloria, I understand what you're saying. If this is a problem, why don't you go talk to Sally about it? See if you guys can work it out. And if they come back, well, what role would you like me to play? Let's get Sally in here and the 3 of us can sit down together. You want to try to avoid being like the judge, jury, and executioner with some of these personality problems. Encourage them to try to work it out on their own if it's something benign. If it is a situation that involves they're truly whistleblowing about a policy violation, accounting fraud, sexual harassment, bullying, workplace violence, etc. Obviously, in those situations, you need to say, yes, thank you for bringing this to my attention. Let me look into it. And at that point, again, follow your policy, call HR, follow your union contract, and do take those situations seriously. But the ticky-tack little tattling stuff, yeah, Gloria, what are you going to do about that? That does sound like a problem. Why don't you go talk to them about it? Let me know how it turns out. So sometimes that in itself will shut it down because they realize, like, okay, if they want a solution, they'll go solve it. But that usually will expose if they're just trying to bend your ear on something. So good question, Vanessa and Laura. Thank you. Appreciate your chats there. Okay, go 2 more to go here. And we'll be plenty of time at the end as well for questions. So keep them coming as we go, and if not, we'll save some time at the end. So number 5, I did put the boss peer conversation here as kind of pretty high on the totem pole. I think when you have to give bad feedback to the boss, can be very difficult. I put it as terrifying. Maybe that's true for you. Maybe it's not. And a peer conversation. Why, in my experience in working with bosses and peers and people trying to have these conversations, why is this so difficult? I'll cut to the bottom here. You don't want to ruffle feathers. You have to live with the outcome. So a termination, that conversation's over. The problem goes away, unfortunately, whether that's good or bad, but it's done. It's a moment in time and then it's over. You have to live with the boss. You have to live with the peer conversation. You don't want a target on your back. And, it's just in general, that sort of conflict avoidance is kind of human nature, right? We don't ruffle too many feathers if we don't have to. Why are these conversations needed? Maybe among your peers, you drew the short straw and you're the one that said, you know what, John, you're good at talking to the boss. You've got a good rapport with him. Why don't you go do it? So you might have just drawn the short straw. You may have a true business problem, of course, that is dragging down multiple teams and departments. We think about that conversational capacity. You have to develop that skill so that you can deal with tough business problems. You don't want to be sitting there going, gosh, the marketing department, no one likes that color purple they're using in the logo and everyone knows it, but no one wants to go tell them. Go tell them. It's fine. Just do it in a respectful way. So, in the conversational capacity of teams, working in that sweet spot, resolving tough problems, getting things done, this is the good stuff here. Boss and peer conversations, like this is the good stuff. So you're going to get tons of ROI in your business when you can get to this point. How do you do it? Here, I think is, termination conversations, very formal. Here, I think max out the informality. They're your peers. Make friends with them. You can get on the level with a peer and get to that friend point where you can give each other tough feedback and have their back. Be open-minded and curious in this conversation. If you're not the accounting manager, you don't know how to tell them to do their job. If you're not the marketing manager, you don't know how to tell them to do their job. So you need to be a little more open-minded and curious. You certainly don't want to get in a point where you're like telling the boss how to do their job either. So come at it with a little more, turn up the volume, turn up your open-minded, turn up your curious button, and go into it with a more open-mindedness, more curiousness. Ask more questions, leave more room for two-way dialogue. You can get away with a weak managerial muscle of conversation with a direct report who you can more often use a tell approach. With a boss and a peer, you need to use more of an ask approach. Keep it two-way. And again, here, I would say prevention is key. You can use one-to-ones, even with a peer, even if it's informal, even if you just, hey, you know what? I've been checking my calendar. We haven't been out to lunch for a while. Let's go. Or we haven't connected one-on-one for a while. Let's do that. It doesn't need to be a formal one-on-one, but that sort of mindset will help you prevent these conversations from being difficult. Regular dialogue with your boss gives you a time, a place, and a cadence of talking about work stuff. Regular dialogue and regular connection with your peers gives you a time, a place, trust, a cadence for talking about business. So it's worth investing that time. So, all right, so logistics. Conversation starters here, again, they're going to sound a little different. Hey, can we grab a coffee? Can we have a Zoom call over coffee? Can we grab lunch? how do you think such and such is going? Month end close. I'll stick with an accounting example. How do you think that's going? I have some thoughts about it. Are you open to hearing that? Do you think there's room for improvement? Would you like some feedback? So again, I'm going in with, I'm not armored up for this conversation. I'm going in open-minded. I'm trying to get this conversation on the table, but I'm not going to come in and probably start barking orders about this conversation. So I want to share some feedback. I want to ask some questions. I want to get the problem on the table. As a example, I consulted with a business recently that had two partners, and one partner really wasn't doing much in the business. And the other partner needed to try to broach the breakup conversation, and knew that, this could obviously blow up and become a big drama. And what they did was said, okay, look, I have some situations I'm dealing with. I would like in the business to be able to do this. I'd like to be able to do this. I'd like to be able to do this. And from your perspective, I don't think that's going to work. Are you open for a conversation about that? Can we get together and talk about this? So rather than saying, hey, look, I need to kick you out of the business for these 3 reasons, just put the problem on the table and said, hey, here are some problems I've observed. Are you open to talking about this? Partner responded back, yes, let's meet for lunch. Great. And then because the partner had already had time to think about it, came to the table and said, you know what? I think it's time for me to back out of the business. Huzzah, right? You don't have to go in there and start barking orders to get your way. You can put the problem on the table, ask the right questions, and give people the time and the space that they will need to come to it themselves. So that's how I would approach a boss peer conversation. Now, if your boss is like sexually harassing other employees, or, stashing drugs in their desk, or photocopying their butt and emailing it to other employees, then you got to probably handle that in a different way. And probably I'd be going to their boss or to HR. So, again, this is not the comprehensive approach for all situations you might encounter, but it's a starting point. So tough conversations. Tattling on someone who's clearly breaking a rule and a policy violation, to me, I shouldn't use the word tattle, reporting someone who is violating a clear policy, to me, that's not as difficult. That's cut and dry. That's black and white. I'm going to go get that issue on the table and get that out of the way. But to me, I think the harder ones are kind of the feedback, the your button heads, the personality conflict with the peers. So peers who continually, kind of going back to Vanessa's question earlier in the chat, employees who continually kind of butt heads, I've actually challenged them with saying, look, you need to have a one-on-one with Gloria on a regular basis, get to know her a little bit. Maybe you're going to lunch, maybe you're going to coffee, you work it out, you figure it out. But I'm tasking you with improving this relationship. This is your coworker and your peer, and I expect you to be on a friendly basis with them. So come back to me with your plan. So bonus answer there. Okay, boss peer conversations, let's wrap that up. And then finally, the awkward conversation. This is high on my list of the worst things about working with humans, is that we're just all weird. We're all weird and gross. And sometimes we just have to talk about it. So why is this awkward conversation needed? Somebody did something that was just a little too human, a little weird, a little gross. We're all animals. And why is it tough? I mean, seriously, it's the worst. So how do you approach these conversations? These, again, this is like somebody's cutting their nails at their desk, or their toenails, just being gross. Dress code stuff, I think, falls in here. All kinds of grody groads. And then, again, I think in HR, I feel like we have a lot of these, because we end up being the ones people call when they want to deal with this stuff, and now we have to do it. But they're just the worst. So how do you do this? Yeah, it's hard. Someone says it's harder than firing. This was at the top of my scale. I think if you're firing someone for performance, you've done everything that you can do to help them, and now it's like you're out of options. You're releasing them back to the wild and probably doing them a favor at that point. But these are tough, because you still got to work with them the next day. So I would start that conversation this way. Look, George, there's something we got to talk about, and I admit it's going to be a little uncomfortable. It's a little awkward. It's a little personal. but it's important. And as your boss, as your friend, whatever, whoever you are, I want to bring this to your attention. It's about the nail clipping at the desk. Are you open to talking about that real quick? And hopefully George says yes, and you're going, oh, thank God. So George, the nail cutting at the desk, it's distracting. It's grossing people out. It's got to stop. Can I ask you to stop it? Can I count on you to knock that off? I've had dress code ones. I had, a summer intern who was with the short skirts, and the CEO saw it and was like, who is that lady working here? And I was like, oh, somebody's got to talk to him. So this poor supervisor, this young female employee, and this awkward, kind of lovable, but sort of awkward IT manager was going to talk to this intern about her dress code. And I was like, oh, I will help you. And so we sat her down and just said, hey, look, Heidi, there's something I got to talk about with you. It's a little uncomfortable. It's a little unpersonal, or it's a little personal, but people are talking about it. I want to bring it to your attention. And she came to me. She said, is it about that outfit I wore yesterday? And I said, yes, it is. So I didn't even have to tell her at that point. I just said, hey, I've got an uncomfortable conversation. She knew what it was going to be about. And she said, is it about the dress I wore yesterday? I guess it was a little questionable. And I said, yep, you know what? The next time you ask that question, the answer is no. And I need you to wear skirts that are to your knees, keep everything covered. And if you do that, this is the last time we'll ever have to talk about it. And she said, okay, great, I can do that. I said, perfect, thank you. And then at that point, then she started crying. It's like, no, we were doing so well. Gave her a box of tissues, told her, don't feel bad about it. It's fine. If I had those legs, I'd probably stick them out too. But here at work, you need to keep it covered. Here's some tissues, get yourself together. Don't feel bad about it. We'll never talk about this again. And she was like, okay, cool. She took 5 minutes. She got herself together. She went back to work. And that was the last time we ever talked about her wardrobe. So, again, I think just put it on the table. Don't beat around the bush. Don't spend 20 minutes talking about fashion before you get to the point. Just put it on the table, get in, get out, get it over with. Let them know it's going to be awkward, get their permission, get in, get it over with. So that's how I would handle that. It's horrible. You just don't want to be sitting there sweating. Just get it on, get out. So finally here, just to wrap up, how do you avoid having tough conversations? Again, building conversational capacity. That means flexing your muscle, building your skill at this area. It makes your team smarter, it makes your team stronger, it makes your team more resilient. When you can talk about tough problems that are impacting your business and people know that that's safe to do, they will do it. They want to help you be successful, but if you're going to blow up at them, then they probably won't bring it to you. So flex your muscle here, get comfortable with the uncomfortable, and practice this skill. So it's hugely important to your business. How do you do it? Call it a one-on-one, a 1-2-1, a check-in, a huddle, call it what you want, make it your own. But it's one of the most important time investments you can make in your business. It builds trust. When you're having a one-on-one with a direct report who is, you're their manager, 80% of what you're talking about is, how was your weekend? What are you working on? Oh, that's awesome. That's a great idea. Let me think about it. Good job. Thanks for doing that. It's all good. And when you're doing that, you're putting deposits in the piggy bank with this person, right? You're building up your bank account with this person. So that when you do have to have a difficult conversation, they already know that there's enough in that bank account to cover your balance. They're not going to write you off and think, God, what a jerk. They only talk to me when they have something bad to say. No, you did all this bank account building with good stuff. So you're building trust. You're creating a time, a place, a cadence for discussing the important stuff of work. So you've got the inertia already covered. When you're thinking, oh God, I got to talk to George about this weird thing. Oh, good. His one-on-one's on Monday. I'll talk to him about it then. It's already set up. That's half the inertia right there. And as your business grows or other people move up in your business, you're setting a standard there that this is how we do things. It becomes part of the culture that we have conversational capacity, right? We're setting a pattern for that. So make these your own. They're absolutely essential. Performance reviews, take care of themselves. Difficult conversations, take care of themselves. awkward conversations take care of themselves. So I can't say enough about the importance of doing one-on-ones. 15 minutes a week, 5 minutes every morning, an hour a week, go to lunch once a month. Like, figure out what cadence works for you, but then put it on the calendar and just try to stick to it. You might not stick to it every single instance. You might have to reschedule it. That's fine, but you'll have the time there, the place, the cadence, etc. So can't say enough about it. I'll get off my soapbox. In that staff or boss conversation, I might put these similar here because you either are talking to your staff or you are the staff. So similar agenda, but start off, ask some questions, get to know them, build some personal connection. What are you working on? What successes have you had? What did you get done last week? Oh, that's great. Good job. What's going well? What's getting in the way? What ideas do you have? Share what you're working on. Again, whether that's up or down the line. And again, say thank you. Gosh, thanks for doing that. Good job, right? You're building all that good juju that will make difficult conversations easier. So you've become the safe place to go to, and you're becoming the feel good trust place to go to. So when people are thinking like, who should I talk to? Should I talk to Gloria, who likes to gossip with me? Or should I go talk to my boss, who I trust will help me resolve this problem? Right? Hello. So that's what I would use for an agenda. And then with a peer, pretty similar, but hey, how's it going in your department? Yeah, I know your employee and my employee don't get along. They fight like kids. But what are they working on? What are their priorities? How can you support them? What's going well? Feedback, ideas, etc. So the agenda here is pretty similar, but it is worth, especially if you have a peer where like their work flows down the line to your department, or your department gives the work to their department. I think up and down the chain, those are good peers to talk to. Any type of peer that is you've had conflict with, or staff in your departments aren't getting along, those are very rich and rewarding and high value peers. And plus they're your peers. You can't go to happy hour with your staff anymore, so you hang out with your peers. You got a new peer group as a manager, so get to know them, make them your friends. Don't be friending all of your staff. This is your peer group, is your peers at your same level in your organization. So okay, so those are the conversations we wanted to talk about here. We looked at our pain scale. We talked about several different types of difficult conversations, and then we close with how to make them less difficult by doing good one-on-ones and regular dialogue. But takeaways here: building that conversational capacity is essential to any business. When dysfunction starts to smell like, we don't talk about things like that here. Get that conversation started sooner rather than later. It gets worse if you procrastinate. It's harder, it's tougher, it's more painful, it's more awkward if you procrastinate. Two-way dialogue, open-ended questions, keep it informal. If you work yourself into a tizzy by thinking you have to have this super structured conversation, just go to lunch, have it out, ask some questions, it'll be fine. Or a lunch Zoom call or a coffee clatch on Zoom, however you're working these days. Go sit at the park, whatever. And again, you can prevent difficult conversations from being so difficult with regular ongoing dialogue that puts a time, a place, and a pattern of trust on these conversations. So in closing here, definitely do reach out. If you want more additional information, if you want a speaker, if it's something in-house for you, if you need training like this for your team or policies or programs, or maybe you just want to have a conversation because we've been working remotely for so long, just give me a holler. Sarah will be sending out a survey here to kind of follow up, and I'll leave my contact information here as well, my email, phone number, etc. And we've got some time here for questions. So what questions do you have?
Thank you so much, Kelly.
Sure. Yeah, you can unmute if people have questions. They can or comments. You can unmute, or you can use the chat. I'll be here. So
this is Deepak. I have a question.
Yeah, Deepak.
So how to find out in first 10 minutes of meeting or in the interview, like that this is going to be a rock star employee?
Oh, how do you know in the first 10 minutes of an interview? Well, I feel like, and we didn't get into like hiring conversations here, interview conversations, but I'm a big, I've got a IO psych assessment background, and here on the screen here, I actually have a link to a hiring assessment that I use. It's called Predictive Index, and I think you can have a richer interview conversation. First of all, if you know what you're looking for in the job, you have a solid job profile with skills and competencies, and you know who you're looking for. And you know that this candidate matches up with that. So I think assessments are really powerful for matching candidates to roles and criteria and things like that. And it allows you to have a richer conversation. When I'm interviewing, I'm kind of a little bit, I don't know if it's old school, but I mean, I like to use that sort of behavior-based approach. Like, tell me about a time when you did this thing. I look for, are they energetic and enthusiastic about the work? Do they have a pattern of career progression that they've consistently sort of taken on more and stepped up? And can they talk about achievement? Like, what did they do? What did they accomplish? What did they like about it? I'm looking for a lot of those things in that first 10 minutes. So, but I would not try to also, I guess I would caution against trying to weigh a hiring decision in that short of amount of time. I like to get to know a person. A good hour to an hour and a half interview conversation would probably be appropriate. So.
What is more important, the technical skills or the behavioral skills?
Good question. It depends on the job. If it's a technical job, technical skills. If it's the manager of the technical team, probably 50-50. If it's the director or the VP of a very technical function, you're still probably leaning at that point more heavily on people skills. So it does depend on the job. So.
Laura, did you have a question?
Yeah, it was really great. Thanks. I will say a little bit to Deepak's question he just had. Some of our companies, big corporations, are starting to be more, the technical skills have an opportunity for professional development so we can teach, but you can't teach people how to have critical thinking and problem solving. So make sure you incorporate those both similarly. But I was going to ask about something that you talked about, Kelly, about personal relationships, especially when there aren't peers. If you're the boss of an organization, it turns out that that's more complicated than what you just described because there aren't peers. So your peers might be your management team, but they're still beneath you. How do you manage that of that friend versus employee relationship? And I found that's quite difficult to navigate.
Yeah, it is difficult to navigate. I agree. Yeah, I feel for you. So you're saying you're the boss, you're the CEO, you're the business owner. Am I hearing you right?
Yeah. And you can have a team. And
Yeah.
sometimes it feels like that team are both your friends and your trusted team leaders. And
Yeah.
they have employees below you.
Yeah.
But I think that's a challenge and it can be lonely sometimes. I mean, it's not like string the violins, or, whatever, but how do you put barriers there?
Yeah, good question. I think it's the balance there is that if you're the boss and you have people who report to you, at some level you have to provide some inclusion, equal opportunity. What if I'm inviting one person to happy hour, I need to probably invite the whole team to happy hour or the barbecue at my house, whatever. So I think where you can get yourself in some unbalanced equations there is where you've got one person that you're real friendly with, but the other people don't get that same level of access to you. So if you're going to do friendly things with your team, do them with everybody. Everybody gets invited to the pool party or the barbecue or the Zoom happy hour or the Zoom pajama party or whatever you're doing. So, include everybody there. Be inclusive, honor diversity, include everybody in that. So that's one place. And then I think, it is sort of balancing, they're not this, and I guess the other thing I would say is, punch up, not down. So you're not going to go to your staff with your personal problems, your marital problems, your too deep in your health issues. I mean, some level of humanity there is definitely warranted, but you're not going to confide about your pending divorce with one of your staff, right? Go find a real friend for that you don't work with. So I'm not saying don't be friendly, but like have some boundaries there of like the kind of stuff that is work related and the kind of stuff that's not. go have fun with your team, take them out on your boat, go golfing, have an offsite, whatever is your thing, go do it with everyone. And then keep truly personal stuff probably for your real friends outside of work. Does that help? This high level boundaries, I guess, is what I'm trying to impart there. So.
Sometimes those boundaries are hard. Your real friends and your work friends might merge in some sectors.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is a balance there. I've personally never been, and I've always been in HR, so people aren't really firing away their friend requests at me, but I try to keep off of like my direct reports. Like I'm not going to send them a Facebook friend request. I'm probably not even going to accept their Facebook friend request. And I'll just tell them, hey, look, that's my place with my family and my people. And I don't need to know everything you're doing in your life. Like allow yourself some space. We don't need to be Facebook friends. So I try to keep some boundaries there as well, and again, like they're going to hear about your kids and probably hear about you complain about your spouse or your sibling or your parents, whoever you complain about. They'll hear some of that, but it does get sticky, and you try to keep some kind of boundaries there. And again, just watch out that you're not latching on to one person. I think the equation can get unbalanced when you're latching on to the accounting manager and the marketing managers over there going like, what am I, chopped liver? Does she like me? So watch out for those unbalanced equations. So.
That's a really great question. And I feel like people are just complex. It's hard because we're kind of, especially in this COVID season, just a little bit bleeding all over the place. And we spend so much time together. So this has been incredibly helpful for me. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Oh, good.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Kelly before we wrap up tonight?
How to deal with horrible bosses?
Thank you, Deepak. Couldn't quite hear that, but thank you for attending. I appreciate it. I appreciate all of you being on this call. And I hope you got something valuable out of it. If we didn't address the type of tough conversation that you're struggling with, in a twisted way, I love helping you through that. I would love to help you through that. So I do want to hear about it. I can help you navigate it. Shoot me an email or call, text, whatever. Find me and we'll chat. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And we will post this to our YouTube channel. So if you came in late or you had to step away for anything, you can catch it on our YouTube channel. Hopefully tomorrow I'll get that posted. And don't forget the feedback survey.
Thanks so much. Bye, everybody. Have a
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.